The Detroit Lions just gave us another preseason performance that revealed a lot more than the final score ever could, and if you were watching closely, there were several reasons to come away from this game feeling very encouraged about what this team is building. There were certainly some problems, especially with the deeper levels of the offensive line and the number of penalties, but the bigger story is what happened in the trenches, because the Lions once again showed a level of physicality that could become one of the defining characteristics of this team. Let's start with the area that deserves the most attention, the defensive line and the run defense. For the second straight preseason game, Detroit's front seven looked extremely difficult to run against. Washington simply could not establish much on the ground. The Commanders finished with only 35 rushing yards on 17 attempts, an average of just 2.1 yards per carry. Jackery Krosky-Merritt had 10 carries for 30 yards. Sam Hartman had 1 carry for 6 yards. Craig Reynolds had 2 carries for 2 yards, and Robert Henry actually finished with negative rushing yards. That is the kind of performance that immediately gets your attention, and this was not just one player making a few tackles behind the line. The entire front was doing its job. The defensive line was clogging running lanes, the linebackers were filling the gaps, and Washington simply had very little room to work with. That is especially important because Detroit spent so much of the offseason emphasizing the defensive front, adding more pressure players, and trying to build a defense capable of creating problems at the line of scrimmage. Now we are seeing the results. DJ Wonnum was able to generate pressure and record a sack. Derek Moore also got to the quarterback, and Skylar Gill-Howard continued to show athleticism and the ability to make plays from the interior. The most exciting part is that Aiden Hutchinson has not even played in the preseason yet, so when you look at what this defensive line has already done without Hutchinson taking a single preseason snap, it becomes very easy to understand why expectations are starting to rise. The Lions are not simply hoping this defensive front will be better. Through 2 preseason games, they are showing signs that it could become a legitimate strength of the team. And it is not only the defense. Detroit's rushing offense also deserves a lot of credit. The Lions ran the football 35 times for 169 yards, averaging 4.8 yards per carry, while scoring 2 rushing touchdowns. That is not something to dismiss. The offensive line opened holes, the running backs took advantage of them, and Detroit consistently found success moving the football on the ground. That brings us to one of the biggest themes from these first 2 preseason games. The Lions are winning in the trenches. That might sound simple, but it is one of the most important things you can see from a football team. If your defensive line can dominate the run game and create pressure, while your offensive line can consistently create rushing lanes, you are giving yourself a foundation that can translate when the regular season arrives. Of course, preseason football comes with a lot of backups and players fighting for roster spots, so nobody should treat these performances as proof that Detroit has already solved every problem, but the trend is absolutely encouraging. There were also some questions at quarterback. Josh Dobbs and Luke Altmyer both had moments that kept the competition interesting. Dobbs completed 7 of 12 passes for 58, 3%, and threw an interception, but he also produced an impressive touchdown run that showed the athletic ability he can bring with his legs. Altmyer completed 9 of 13 passes, good for 69.2%, and although he did not throw a touchdown or interception, he was sacked multiple times and had to operate behind an offensive line that was struggling at points. The numbers alone do not give us a definitive answer. That is why the quarterback competition remains a matter of preference at this stage. If you believe Luke Altmyer has the higher ceiling, there is certainly evidence in this game to support that opinion. If you prefer Josh Dobbs because of his experience and ability to make plays with his legs, there are reasons to make that argument as well. The Lions may already have a clearer internal picture of the competition than the public does, but based on what we saw here, it is still difficult to declare one player the unquestioned winner. Unfortunately, the deeper offensive line was one of the biggest negative takeaways from the game. Miles Frazier, who was expected to have a chance to compete for a meaningful role, has not shown enough through these 2 preseason games to separate himself. The interior offensive line struggled, particularly as the game moved deeper into the second half and the fourth quarter, when the Lions were mixing in players further down the depth chart. There were also too many penalties. Detroit had a drive in the fourth quarter where 3 penalties were committed, and that is something the team absolutely has to clean up. It is fair to point out that many of these flags came late in the game with backups and young players rotating in and out, which naturally hurts continuity. Still, penalties were a problem for this team last season, and the Lions cannot afford to allow that issue to follow them into the the regular season. The good news is that the problems were not enough to overshadow the bigger picture. The tight end group continued to look strong even without Sam LaPorta playing. Brock Wright, Tyler Conklin, and Jackson Meeks all contributed, with Meeks catching 4 passes for 33 yards and Conklin adding 2 receptions for 21 yards. That depth could become extremely valuable considering the injury problems Detroit experienced at the position last season, and this is where the roster competition becomes fascinating. Tay Martin is making a strong case for the final wide receiver spot. He only caught 1 pass for 11 yards, but his overall performance stood out enough to create the impression that he could have an advantage in the competition. Special teams ability could also help his case. Cedric Wilson made some plays as well, while Tariq Black and Dominic Lovett remain part of the competition. Then there is Greg Dortch, who showed the kind of elusiveness and versatility that can make a player extremely valuable. He looks capable of contributing as a returner and as an offensive weapon, and that versatility could give him a significant role as the Lions continue shaping the roster. The secondary also had positives. Rock Ya-Sin continued to show the physical tackling style expected from him, while Keith Abney was involved in some plays where completions were allowed but remained very close in coverage. Not every completion means a defender played poorly, and in Abney's case, the coverage was tight enough that the offensive player simply made a difficult play. DJ Reed also returned to the field and recorded 4 tackles, which was an encouraging sign simply because Detroit wants to keep its veteran defensive backs healthy heading toward the regular season. Avonte Maddox also made an impressive tackle, reading the play quickly and stopping the ball carrier with authority. Devin White continued to show up around the football as well. His run defense remains one of the areas where he can make a major impact, even though there is still room for improvement in pass coverage. There is also a larger roster question developing on defense. Skylar Gill-Howard has continued to make plays and may be pushing himself higher on the depth chart. That is exactly what you want to see from a young player trying to earn a roster spot. Detroit needs talented players, and if a younger player is consistently showing a higher ceiling, that creates a very good problem for the coaching staff. The same applies to the tight ends and wide receivers. Every preseason game brings us closer to the moment when these competitions have to be decided, and that is what makes the final preseason stretch so interesting. But perhaps the biggest takeaway from all of this is that Detroit looks like a team with real depth in several important areas. The offensive line is opening holes. The defensive line is dominating. The running game is producing. The tight ends are making plays. Young defensive players are showing up, and even though there are still mistakes that need to be corrected, the overall direction is extremely encouraging. There is one thing, however, that I still want to see from this defense before we can say it has taken another major step: more takeaways. Detroit forced a turnover on downs and had a special teams recovery, but the defense needs to start creating interceptions and fumbles. When Kirby Joseph returns to full strength, that could become especially important. Joseph has already shown that he can be a difference maker in coverage, and getting more takeaways would give this offense even more opportunities. So as we move closer to the regular season, the picture is becoming clearer. The Lions do not need to win preseason games for the victories to matter, but watching this team dominate the trenches, defend the run the football effectively, and see young players compete for important roster spots gives us plenty to discuss. The question now is what you think all of this means for the Detroit Lions heading into the regular season. After watching these first 2 preseason games, which player or position group has impressed you the most? And do you believe this team is ready to take another step forward? And that is really where this Lions team becomes so interesting, because the closer we get to the regular season, the less important the preseason record becomes, and the more important these individual evaluations become. The coaching staff is no longer simply trying to see who can make a play. They are trying to determine who can be trusted when the games actually count, who deserves a roster spot, and which players can provide depth when injuries inevitably happen during an NFL season. One of the clearest examples is the running back room. Detroit finished this game with 169 rushing yards, and that production was not simply the result of one player breaking a big run. The offensive line deserves a lot of credit for creating opportunities, and the depth at running back continues to look encouraging. There were multiple backs finding room to run, which makes the competition and roster decisions even more difficult for the coaching staff. But once again, the offensive line has to be part of the conversation. The starters and primary backups performed well enough to create confidence, but the deeper group struggled, especially late in the game. That is something Detroit cannot ignore. The difference between having quality depth and simply having bodies available becomes extremely important once the regular season begins. You can have a great starting lineup, but if injuries force you to go deeper into the roster, those players have to be capable of keeping the offense functional. That is why the performances from the backup offensive linemen matter so much, even if they are not going to receive much attention from the average fan. The quarterback situation is similar. Luke Altmaier and Josh Dobbs are not simply playing for statistics. They are competing for trust. Every throw, every decision, every third down situation, every mistake, and every positive play becomes part of the evaluation. Altmaier showed efficiency with his 69.2% completion rate, while Dobbs showed that he can create something with his legs. Neither completely separated himself in this game, and that means the competition remains open from the perspective of what we can see. The Lions themselves may have already made their decision internally, but there is not enough from this game alone to say that one quarterback has completely won the job. That is why the debate among fans is still completely understandable. Then we get to one of the most encouraging developments of the entire preseason: the rookies. Blake Miller was on the field for an extended period and continued to show why Detroit is excited about what he can become. Derek Moore recorded a sack. Skylar Gill-Howard continued making plays. Keith Abney showed competitiveness in coverage. These are exactly the kinds